I want to start with a joke. How do you make a small fortune with horses? You take a large fortune and you buy horses. Now this says something about the equine economy. And we, all of us who support and care for horses and for the horse scene and the horse sector, understand this. And it's something that we don't talk about very much. There's a lot of things in the horse world we don't talk about in public, like danger. We don't want them to know how many people get hurt in eventing every year. They might tell us we can't do it. So we don't talk about it too much. No? And this is one of those topics. Now, I come from Norway. And the enterprise, the innovation bodies of the government who support economic development in Norway, they talk about big projects. Oh yeah, Rhys, I built a new chemical factory in my commune. We had 1,300 jobs. What do you do? Oh, I support people with horse businesses that have 5 jobs. Oh yes, okay, yes. So, I have been studying the new equine economy for some time now, asking the question, what is it? And of course, you all know what it is, because you're part of it. So this is one of my first attempts to make some kind of conclusion, and to think about what do we do, and how does this affect how we position ourselves as part of the wider national economy, local economy, European economy. And the 2 features that I want to focus on, first of all, is that if you want to make a small fortune in horses, you've got to have money to start with. Profitability is not the same in horses as it is in the chemical industry. Yeah? But what's really important is that we are in business because we have this passion for riding, for horses, and we want to build our lives around that. And this is not an insignificant thing. This is a very important thing. So if I start from this, and I started, by the way, to describe the new equine economy from many other places, but I want to start from here right now. We can agree, you know. A lot of labor, a lot of work is low paid or even no paid in the equine economy. There are a few breeders who make a lot of money, and there are a lot of breeders who make a little money. There's a lot of work, but very few who really get rich doing it. It's obvious, isn't it? The point of having horses isn't to get rich. It's to have horses. So what does this mean? And what does it mean when we describe the equine economy? And what does it mean for when we go to our local governments and our enterprise agencies and we say, I've got an idea for a 5 million kroner horse business. And they go, go away. How can we convince them that this is important? And that's really what this, presentation is about. Now, there's a lot of slides, and I think you have copies in the paper. I'm not going to go through every part of this because there really isn't time. But there are studies that show that there is profit, but there's not a lot of it. Okay? But there is a lot of economic activity, and work like Lina's work and Markus' work and Serpina's work all show that. There's a lot of activity, and there's some profitability, and there's quite a bit of innovation.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What does mean SME?
I'm going to come to that. I'm sorry, I should have put that out. Small and medium scale enterprises.
Eli pienyritykset
Yeah.
suomeksi.
If you look at the rural economy in most countries is big on small and medium scale enterprises and self-employment. And that's why one of the arguments that equine businesses are a key part, can be an important part of the rural countryside economy. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Now, I just said, there's all this great work that's been done. Read it. Support these people. It's good. But they're basically saying, in a sense, to an extent anyway, supporting what I've just said, that there's profitability, but there's not a lot of it. There's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of activity. Yes? Basically, the report from the Equine project, the thing I want to underline is this: the current understanding of the equine sector has to be reconsidered. We have to think in new ways about how we find value in this. And that's what I'm proposing to do. And what I'm saying is that horse businesses are special because they're often based first on their owner's passion for horses, and second on, I want to make a living doing this. Now, it's not just horses that do this. I teach a bachelor in what in Norway we call bygdeutvikling, rural innovation and development. And somebody who's making local food has a passion for local food and starts a business. I mean, we're not the only ones. But we could see ourselves that way, and somehow I think those people making local food probably get a little bit more respect than people wanting to do horse businesses in a certain way. You know? Now, I'm a human geographer by training, but I do a lot of what's called economic geography. And economists. If you think horse people argue a lot, boot stalling, installing, you should look at economists. They really argue. Oh, top down, bottom up. I found this man, Roger Lee, who wrote this paper in 2000 called Shelter from the Storm, Geographies of Regard in the Worlds of Horticultural Consumption and Production. And he says, his basic question is, in small businesses, what's the relationship between the money, the rational economic return, the profit, and the social production that happens? Because economists love to pretend they're scientists, but they're not. They're social scientists. Economics is not about numbers, it's about people. And it's about social production. And you can see this, you know, when you have a run on the banks, you know, oh, the economy's going bad. That's because of what people believe. It's not necessarily rational. Yeah? And that's what economists study. Why do people keep on in these kind of businesses when they don't make a lot of money? When very often you could probably make more money putting it in an investment company and just getting an annual interest return. Why do they do it? And he looks at, in England, what they call the hardy nursery stock, which is flower plants in pots, special plants, orchids, begonias, all those kind of plants. And he says he does a survey of 360 of these companies. And he says that the UK has the widest variety of these kind of companies anywhere in the world. And over 40% of them have been in business for over 20 years. And yet over half of them sell less than £20,000 a year. £20,000 a year. That's gross, not net. But even if it was net profit, that's not enough to keep a family in the UK. And yet, 40% of them have been in business for 20 years. Why? It's not rational. An investor or a banker would take the money and run. He says the average net income of everyone, the big ones, the little ones, everything, is still less than £30,000 per year, and over 13% of them lose money. Is this starting to sound familiar? And more than 40% of their costs are made up of low-paid and unpaid labor. Even more familiar, yes? He says on the criteria, the conventional criteria of economic evaluation, these businesses are marginal. They shouldn't survive, but they do. Why? Well, he says, normally, when something is valued, it's valued according to what economists like to call use value, its utility. And he basically says that the difference between that utility value and what people pay is the social value. What people, I love orchids, and I'm going to pay more, and not only that, I'm going to go to this guy I know who does special orchids and knows really a lot about them. And yes, it's going to cost more than if I buy a flower in the supermarket. But I get something for that that's more than the flower. And that is the social value. And he says that that social value comes from knowledge and from passion. Yes. He basically says that, this is pretty, economically, this is pretty kinky. These people are enthusiasts. They're not doing it for rational reasons. They value their trade for other reasons than pure economic return. I'm going to just pass through this. Well, he said, okay, and I'll stop for a minute. And of course, in this day and age, and you've seen this in Finland in the last 10 years, more and more big retail corporations coming in, more and more small local butchers and bakers and food shops and greengrocers and trade providers closing down. Because rationally, in terms of progress, capital comes in and rationalizes our life. It's just money, it's just money, it's just money, And it's like if you go to, to the Coop, Bigga, to the hardware, and you want to buy some paint, and you say to the 18-year-old, so can I paint this over that kind of paint? I don't know. Just give me your money, I'll give you the paint. You go to the old hardware store, and they say, oh, no, that's alkyd, and this is water-based, and you want to... But you don't get that knowledge exchange anymore, because money has replaced that. We want the cheap price, and we lose that knowledge and that passion. Welcome to progress. And he says that his study, Roger Lee says, he's rediscovering the social nature of the economic. He says there's nothing new. 200 years ago, economists used to talk about this. So this is back to the future, or forward to the past, or something. Yeah? And what he says is, actually, you cannot separate the economic and the social. They actually are the same thing. It's just that when we only see economics as money, we can pretend the social isn't there. And that's what happens. And so he says, in this study, I'm looking at alternative systems of value. And here's the key thing. He quotes this economist, Avner Ofner. And this was written in the 1950s. He says that the economy operates whenever incentives, in other words, reasons to go and spend, are affected by personal relations. It arises out of the benefits of social and personal interaction from the satisfaction of what he calls regard. Now in English, regard means to look, but it means also to look respectfully, to look with respect. So I would say this is about respect. And it tends to be preferred when trade involves personal interaction and when goods and services are unique, are expensive, or have many dimensions of quality. Okay, you want to buy a new dress. You can go to a couturier house and meet the person who designs and sews the dress, but it's going to cost you 10,000 euros. Or you can go to, you know, H&M, and it's, you know, 12 euros and you got your dress. That's what he's talking about. That expensive quality goods, ones that last, ones that are well made, ones that are unique. It's not just that they cost more money. You're actually paying for that personal interaction, for the knowledge of the designer, the knowledge of the seamstress. Yeah? So there's nothing new here. It's just that that bottom end of the economy has gotten bigger and more a part of our life. So in other words, a social economy of regard, this word regard, operates when there is respect, when there's personal interaction, and when there's unique products of quality. Now, to give you an example, I'm a bit of a coffee nerd. And it came about when, many years ago, when my partner got a job working for a Dutch woman in Vancouver who was a coffee roaster. I used to hate coffee until then. And then I discovered really good coffee that was fresh roasted, fresh ground, different tastes. And so, you know, I started getting into that. So when I moved to Norway, I had to go and search all the coffee sellers. And I have this guy in Sandnes, and he's great. You know, I call him my drug dealer. He sells chocolate, coffee, beer-making supplies, wine-making supplies. Oh, and e-cigarettes, too. But he knows his coffee, you know. He says, like, he gets it from the same roaster in Stavanger as some of the other shops do. But he says, after 3 weeks, if I haven't sold it, I send it back. Coffee shouldn't be more than 3 weeks older than it's been roasted. So I go out of my way to buy my coffee from him because I respect his knowledge of coffee, because I have that, you know, personal communication with him, and I pay a little bit more. It's worth it. We have an economy of regard going on. Yeah? So you get this idea, what I'm trying to get at here with this kind of economy of regard, you know. It produces values that are more than simply about numbers of power, yeah, of money, I mean, you know. And so he's saying, look, you know, this regard, actually, we've seen it kind of disappear out of modern life, but in some parts of modern life, it actually replaces that strict financial transaction. Mutual respect and regard substitute for pure economic rationality. And remember, economic rationality means I want it the cheapest possible. The most rational thing to do is to spend as little money as possible and get as much as you can. That's what economists, there's a little bit more to it than that. There's also a future, but it's basically that. The seller offers to the customer their time, information, their labor, their expertise, as well as, of course, the value embedded in the coffee. You know, this is good coffee, and I even know it's fair trade, you know, so I know that more of what I pay is getting back to the people who grow it, and all of that stuff. The buyer gets status. I shop at Saphir. That's where I get my coffee. Oh, do you? I do too. You know? I'm at a conference in Groningen in Holland. There's a little coffee shop there, and it's coffee break time. So I go in, and there's some guy who's a real coffee nerd. And I thought it would be good because on the board outside it said, we serve, what did it say? Something like Wookiees, something. It was a bunch of Star Wars words anyways. I thought, okay, whoever's put this on here is going to be interesting. Yeah, so I go in. There's some guy, he's completely over the top. So I said, hey, I have a Swiss Gold filter in my hotel, but I haven't got time to, Cool. I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. Just sit down. I'll make you a coffee you're going to love. I get status because I'm part of that scene. Now, of course, think about the horse world. It's very much the same, yeah? I get identity. I get knowledge. And I get something that I'm going to use and use and use. It's not disposable and throwaway. No? I get extended use value. And when I do that, I don't care that this coffee nerd can hardly speak, because there's this regard, there's this respect. So the seller gets a buyer who's willing to put up with this organization, a buyer who's willing to say, oh, you don't have it? When will you get it again? Oh, okay, I'll come back. In this economy of regard, you have a reciprocal exchange between the seller and the buyer. And that's, of course, where the real value is. And for us, that's in the horse world, that's where a lot of our value actually sits. We don't exchange, now what kind of bit should I get, you know? Oh, what have you got? Oh, I've got a, have you ever thought of, well, really? You know, they use these in, you know, you're not just buying a bit. You're buying knowledge, yeah, about horse breed. And knowledge, this exchange of knowledge is key to these economies of regard. Because it's not only that the seller knows more than the buyer can know more than the seller. So I go into my guy in Saphira in the coffee and I say, I have a Swiss gold filter, that's what I normally use. Oh, what's that? Oh, I'll bring one in next time. Here, oh, that's nice. I wonder if I can get some of this. Oh, okay. We're part of a community, an exchange, yes? And then I'll say, okay, I'll have a kilo of Monsoon Malabar, please. You know, okay, I have my economic transaction, but there's much more than just the money that goes on. So what's important is, as it says here, this exchange of products and of free specialized knowledge doesn't just justify the high price, but it locks in future exchanges. Or in other words, the customer keeps coming back. Now, if I shop at the Coop, and they have coffee for 48 kroner, and Kiwi has it for 36 kroner, I'm going to go to Kiwi. I'm not going to go back to the Coop, am I? Because all I care about is the price. That's the difference between those two kinds of economies. So, these alternative economies, you know, are what we are a part of in many senses. The trouble is, of course, that rational economy is big, and we are small. And not only that, things are always changing. You can get things in the Coop now that you couldn't get 5 years ago. And those things were once probably sold by small retailers. You know, and so that, you know, that big economy is always looking to add more to it. And you should go to Canada, where the big supermarkets all sell local food. So if you go to one of the big supermarkets on Vancouver Island, you can get Vancouver Island produced stuff, and you can't get it on the British Columbia mainland. They only sell it on the island. On the mainland, they sell local food from the mainland. They've built their retail systems to be able to include that kind of thing. So, of course, there's always a change. And what's happening is, in the UK, more and more people are buying these exotic plants, and the alternative investment funds, venture capitalists are buying up these small companies, turning them into big companies, often moving production away from where it originally was. Just keep the name. There are lots of, in this paper, he interviews 3 people who lost their business. They got about £40,000 a year turnover, they got investments, and the investors got 51% of the company and fired the original owner because he objected to what they wanted to do, because they wanted to make rational profits. So now, 3/4 of the sales of all of these kind of flowers in the UK come from the wholesale sector. In other words, the people that grow them never meet the customers. So it's not just, it's not Alice, well, Cinderella. I mean, there's a contestation going on here. There's competition in these markets. But nevertheless, these small flower businesses stay alive. Yes? So, in other words, as he says, against this backdrop, there still exist businesses which function within this economy of regard. Now, let's think about horse businesses. You can see already the parallels, the knowledge, the social relationships, the expertise, the things, the fact that we're part of a community. Think about, like, the flower businesses build regard, according to Roger Lee, by going to shows and having booths, getting awards, being part of the enthusiast press in the magazines, on the web forums. Would we do the same thing in the horse world? Yes, exactly the same. What's the Hester FE? What's the horse forum? Yeah, you see them there. You think, this is a real horse business. And so we really are in the position of working in an economy and an industry where we're delivering a specialized product for a specialized consumer. And so what that means is we're never going to be Rima Tuzin with our horse business. We're never going to, a single horse business is never going to be able to capitalize and hit on a mass market where that social exchange, where that regard isn't really present. And so that means that when we think about where do we fit in the rural economy, in the national economy, we have to remember, we're not whatever, we're not Apple, we are, part of this equine economies of regard business. Now, the good thing is, there are a lot of good things about this. And these are some of them. And these are the things I try and say to Innovation Norge. For example, when some of the communities I work with put together a proposal to make a horse business, and they go to Innovation Norge, and Innovation Norge wants to say, this isn't agriculture, this isn't industry, we're not interested. And so I say, well, hang on a minute. The horse world is growing 7% a year across the Nordic countries. The age of people riding is getting younger. And in the rural economy, which the Norwegian government really wants to support, horse businesses are small and medium-scale enterprises. They often offer what's called farm pluri activity. In other words, if you're a small farmer and you have a horse business, you get additionalities out of your land, particularly those small farms that are located near enough to cities and towns, where, because about 50% of the riders don't live on farms across the Nordic world. Where do they keep their horses? Not in their apartments. They have to pay somebody to keep their horses, keep them in stalls, keep them in. And if the farmer grows the hay or the bedding, or there's all those kind of additionalities. That's a whole nother paper. We can do that one another time, looking at marginal farmers, especially with agri-industry requiring bigger and bigger farms with more and more capital and more big machines. What that means is more and more farms are external to agri-industry. Family farms, hill farms. This is what horse businesses can support these. Keep people in the countryside. Also, of course, as we all know, riding produces other important public goods. Health and well-being, education, keeping young people in the rural area, supporting female entrepreneurialism, and even maintaining landscape by keeping the landscape alive. I'm not saying that it keeps the landscape the same, but keeping people in the landscape is what makes landscape. So there are some important virtues, some good things about equine economies of regard that we can argue for. Things that will convince policymakers. And probably, I think, more effectively than if we pretend, oh, I'm going to be the next big horse tycoon. And you're going, no, you're not. The chemical factory is the one that's going to make all of the profit. Okay, well, I'm not going to make that much profit, but look, I am going to keep people on the land, and we are going to deliver health and well-being, and we are going to keep small farms economically active and stop this trend of the countryside emptying out. Oh, and we'll make a small profit. Oh, okay, all right. You know, that's why I'm trying to make this argument, you know. All of these things. Plus, of course, the horses are part of our cultural heritage, our cultural landscape, and our cultural identity. Whether it's the Finn horse or the Fjordinga. I mean, I know 4 communas in Vestland, in Norway, that have fjording on their flags. That's how much it's a part of their heritage. No? That's central to their identity of who they are. So these things are important. And of course, they're all part of this idea of regard. Yeah? So only a few horse businesses will become very profitable and offer rational returns on capital. What are rational returns? Well, that changes from time to time. Anything from 6 to 12% return per annum. Yeah. If you invest 100,000, you get that back. You know, only a few of them will exceed that. But they will provide many public goods which may otherwise not be available, like I've just said. And they'll keep people working. Agreed? Does this make sense? Does this describe the horse economy that you know? Because if it does, then it has some consequences for how we think about it and how we represent it and how we promote it. Yeah. For a start, policies, rural development policies, health and well-being policies have to acknowledge those multiple positive outputs. The only way they're going to do that is if we keep telling them and showing them and proving to them and generating evidence that it does. And it means that, okay, if you're going to start a horse business, and I'll talk about this in a minute, just a little bit more, you better make sure that you really are doing sharp business practices, because it's a reasonably, profitably marginal business. And, you know, to make a good living with horses, it means you've got to be pretty good, pretty smart. You know? I call it the multi-fingered hand. I have a woman in the communa near me, and I use her with my Hestinarian bachelor students. We go and look at it. And she shares her annual accounts with us. And her turnover is around 1.7 million Norse kroner. That's about, what, 160,000 euros? And to do that, she has 14 distinct activities. From riding lessons and renting horses, to taking kids from Barnehauge and doing it in like that. In order to make a living, she's working from the crack of dawn until late at night. She's a successful horse entrepreneur. It's not an easy way to make money. That's the point. But it's our passion to have horses. We want to spend our lives with horses. We can do it if we have that right habit. So, multifunctional businesses offering a diversity of goods and services. That's the new equine economy in the 21st century. We need to promote that, and I think it's important. We should be proud that that's what we do. We can't be proud that we made $1 million, but we can be proud that we are keeping the countryside alive, that we are supporting young people in being, you know, healthy and learning and all of those things. And just because we don't make millions doesn't mean that this isn't valid and this isn't important. equine economies of regard. That's what it's about. You know? There's more to being in business than money. And here's what it is. But you also don't want to lose money either. You know, you gotta, got to be smart. Yes? Okay, thank you.